Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Darrell D. Lane, where I get to talk about everything that I normally don't get to talk about on my sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, which you can find on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and all your podcasting apps and platforms. For the podcast I released today for the Friday episode have Ben Karen on, host of the Sports Gobbler podcast, and me and Ben previewed Week 13 of NFL action and Week 14 of college football action. We also kind of got into what we think is wrong with Carson Wentz. We made some interesting bets, and also did the somebodies and the nobodies for the entire NFL. So check that out and see if Ben Karen deems your team as a somebody or a nobody. He only had about 10 somebodies, if I remember correctly. So let's get to the list of things we have today. Skip Bayless' 69th birthday. The scoundrel that you guys all know for being the diabolical hater turned 69 today. We know him for hating on LeBron. He has a cowboy fetish. That's kind of weird. And Tim Tebow. That's how his claim to fame also. Tim Tebow thinking all he does is win. It ended up becoming a pretty big song, actually. So, Skip Bayless, one of the biggest influences in my life in terms of talking about sports. Him and Stephen A. Smith on First Take, originally one of the best sports shows of all time, in my opinion. Whether you love, like, or hate Skip Bayless, here's the power about him. You watch him and you listen to him. That's what makes him special. As crazy as his sports takes are, as asinine as some of the things he says, when he says, like, LeBron's not a top 10 basketball player of all time, or when he says that Tim Tebow's more clutch than LeBron James, or, when he says all these crazy things. The Dallas Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl every year. He says the San Antonio Spurs, they're going to win the NBA championship every year. But that is the magic and the beauty of Skip Bayless. It's outlandish and crazy enough for you to tune in and listen. So, props to Skip Bayless, still doing what he's doing on TV, turning 69 years of age. So, next up we have the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl will not have fans due to COVID-19. Now, I think this is really interesting when we look at all this, because for the Fiesta Bowl, there's going to be limited number of close family of players and coaches for the Fiesta Bowl, which will be in Scottsdale, Arizona. And for the Rose Bowl, there will be no family, no friends of any of the coaches or the players. So here's what I'm going to say. I think what the college football needs to try to do is they need to find a way for, in both circumstances, for the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, to get students, because I don't want to forget about students, under this current stipulation, no students. They can't even go to the Fiesta Bowl. Students should be able to go, because I think that's an awesome experience for the students. They pay tuition, right? COVID's crapped on so many college kids across the country. Students should be allowed to go. Family should be allowed to go, and friends should be allowed to go, particularly your immediate family, your mom, your dad, etc., right? Those people should be allowed to go. So the NCAA needs to figure out a way to make sure that all happens. And if it doesn't happen, I would say, hey, because we know COVID is handled politically, depending on which region of the country you're in. If they're not doing that in the West, Arizona, California, then maybe you have to go to Texas, right? Texas is the mecca of football anyway. Maybe you have to go to Texas to play these games. And obviously, that's probably not realistic. But I'm saying the NCAA has to make a statement where the kids' families need to be able to attend, and the students that go to the university need to attend. And there's a way you can do it where you can social distance and spread everybody out. You can't tell me you can't social distance all these kids, because you can do it, and you can't social distance all the family members. You can do it. If players can be on the field as close together as they are on the sidelines with coaches and stuff, with masks, they're going to probably have masks and stuff like that, then that people can be in the stands. Just have a limited number. You spread everybody out. These football stadiums are humongous. You can make it work. So next up, we have the Knight Commission recommends FBS split from NCAA to form the NCFA. So right now, what this kind of looks like is this would change Division I college football forever and split them from the NCAA. Now, I think this is about time. It should happen. It's just a suggestion. And it probably won't happen for monetary reasons, but Division I college football is not college sports. All these athletes get paid. They don't operate under regular student athlete guidelines that maybe a wrestler, a baseball player, a swimmer, a soccer player would. It's different rules. It's a different lifestyle. It's just different in general. So split it, right? Make it a separate entity, and by that you can pay these athletes. They don't have to go to school, and you don't have to allude to the principal that they're students when we know they're really not students. And I think you leave behind the group of 5 teams like the UCFs, the Cincinnatis, and you just form their own division, similar how there's a Division II, Division III, NIAA, all these divisions for college are separated. So I definitely think that's what should go on, because let's remember, they're making so much money in Power 5 college football that they're their own sport. They're completely separate. It's a $1 billion industry, so I think you should treat it like a $1 billion industry and separate everything. Now we have James Harden doesn't attend to Rockets' individual workouts on Thursday. This is really interesting. What if I gave you guys the proposition that James Harden could forego an NBA season because he wants to get traded and the Rockets aren't going to trade him? I think this is going to be interesting because the NBA, while we've had all these stars request trades, we haven't had that one star that has said, you know what, F all this. I'm not going into camp. I'm not going into preseason games. I'm not going into regular season games until you trade me. I think the closest we got potentially is when everybody said Kawhi wouldn't play in Toronto, even though he ended up doing that. They ended up winning the NBA championship. But I think that's the closest we heard of chitter-chatter to that. What happens if Harden really did that? It doesn't seem like he likes Tillman Fertitta, the Rockets owner. It doesn't seem like he likes the direction the Rockets are going in. I don't think John Wall is all that amusing and exciting for all of us. So what happens if that happened? I think that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on in terms of how ugly this gets with James Harden and the Houston Rockets. Now, Russell Westbrook, James Harden's counterpart that was traded a couple days ago, he will wear the jersey number 4. He will not wear number 0. For all of you guys who don't know, there was a famous guy from Washington who wore number 0 about 10, 15 years ago. Agent Zero himself, Gilbert Arenas, guns in the locker room. That guy. Gilbert gave Russell Westbrook his blessing, though I think Russell Westbrook decided he wanted to change it up. He got number 4. But why, Russ? Why do you have to do this? We had a gunner in Gilbert Arenas, this high-flying, exciting, shoot-first point guard. Be like Gilbert. You should have worn number 0. Come on, it would have been great for us NBA fans. And lastly, the NBA, and this is a big news for guys like J.R. Smith, not to out anybody. The NBA will no longer drug test for marijuana this upcoming season. Now, for all you guys who don't know, to get the NBA players in the bubble initially, right, during the pandemic, they're away from their family, their wives, their kids. The NBA had to make a bargain that they would not drug test for marijuana in the bubble. That was a big reason, right? That was a big reason. If you're going to isolate all these guys from their wives, their kids, their family, confine them to this little dorm room, no drug testing for marijuana. So I think this is going to be interesting. I think part of this is probably to do with the fact that the NBA, they've done a test run with things like this. They're going to keep the play-in tournament. Also, I think maybe they realized that maybe marijuana smoking helped the players perform at a higher level because we saw how much better the basketball was in the bubble. Maybe that was just that they were more calm, they were more relaxed. I don't personally know, but I'm just saying maybe that was a reason. And also, there's going to be more concessions the players have to make with COVID this year, so I think the NBA is kind of like, you know what, we won't drug test. It's just marijuana. Just don't do anything stupid. So that's all we have for this episode of Outside the Shop with me, your host, Darrell. And like I said on Friday, for the Friday pod today that I released, we had Ben Karen on, host of the Sports Wildwood podcast, and we previewed Week 13 of the NFL and Week 13 for college football. Definitely check that out. It's on all your podcasting platforms, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Really great listen. Really great listen. You can also check this up as I'm going to post this to YouTube in probably 10 to 20 minutes as well, and subscribe to that. Now, thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of Outside the Shop. Have a great day and God bless.